Hey, what's up guys, it's T-Bone here and welcome back to another episode of playing Legendary Game of Heroes. So the next event is about to start, and it's called the Tesla Effect. And if you take a look at the cards that are going to be available here, it actually makes for a very powerful deck in that it can create a lot of power gems, which really is sort of the main way to deal a lot of damage against your guild bosses. And so what I want to do is I want to talk about some of the previously released powerful decks and how it's used, and then compare that to this deck so we can sort of see and compare how they fare with each other. So the three decks I'm going to talk about are the well-known Halloween deck and the Panda Deck, as well as the Maiden Deck. And we'll go through each of them right now. So the first one's the Halloween deck. This was the first deck that came out that used intensity really to the max. Okay, so the four cards that all work really well here are the Wicked Witch, Frankenstein's Monster, the Mummy, and then Vas Kor the Merciless, which was a special 13 times commander, and it was also the first time it was introduced. Okay, so these four cards make up this particular deck, and let's talk about each of these cards specifically. Okay, so you got the Wicked Witch. This is your main intensity generator. All right, so if you take a look at her battle skill, she has a cooldown of 1 turn, and if you are able to match 9 gems every time, it will generate 10 corrupt intensity. Okay, and then your Frankenstein's Monster is really a main damage dealer, so that it can actually deal a lot of damage based on the number of intensity. But for the purposes I'm going to talk about here, I'm going to actually ignore this. I'm going to focus on the card that generates the intensity, and then the card that uses intensity to create the power gems. So with that, we're going to go to the Mummy. So the Mummy is the ultra rare card here, and her battle skill basically will create 1 Earth Power Gem 1, and an additional one for every 10 stacks of corrupt intensity. Okay, it does have a 7-turn cooldown, but there's no limitations as to how many power gems it can create. All right, and Vas Kor is a ultra rare version of the same thing. And if you look at his battle skill, it will actually create an Earth Power Gem 1 for every 8 stacks of corrupt intensity. So he requires 2 less, which counts for a lot if you think about the sort of the compounded effect. All right, and so the quick summary here. On the 4th turn, and I'm using 4 turns here because you'll see later there's a deck that the earliest it can actually use this skill is on 4 turns, so I decided to use 4 turns across the board. On the 4th turn, if you use 5 relics, okay, so the thing I'm going to keep consistent as well is assuming you have 5 relics and assuming you have 3 cards that will generate the intensity for you, generates 5 each every turn, so 5 relics for 25 intensity, 4 turns gives you 100. The Witches, because it generates 10 intensity every 2 turns, it will generate 60 in total for the 3 Witches. Okay, so with a total of 100 intensity, if you use 1 Mummy, it will spawn 16 Power Gem 1s. And if you use Vas Kor, it will spawn 20 Power Gem 1s. And of course, you can actually have a Mummy and a Vas Kor, or you can have more Mummies. There's combinations there and you can fill up the entire board with Power Gem 1s. There's no limitations whatsoever. Then let's go into the next deck. This was the second deck that was introduced that also used intensity in a similar way, and that's Freya, Thor, and Valhalla's Maiden. All right. So Freya is the main intensity builder. So what she does is this is based on her passive. Every time the hero attacks, it will add 10 stacks of intensity. Okay, so there's no need to activate anything. As long as you let her attack, she will generate intensity here. And then Thor comes into play here, where he has a battle skill that casts what they call Suitor's Bane, and it lasts for 3 turns. And this is what's needed in order for Valhalla's Maiden to be activated. Okay, so this is a required card for Valhalla's Maiden, and we'll talk about. Let's take a look at now Valhalla's Maiden. So what she does is she will create 1 Power Gem 3, and then if Suitor's Bane is active, it will consume all of the God intensity, and then it will create 1 Power Gem 1 for every 10 stacks of God intensity as well. So again, it also uses, it also just needs 10 stacks, and it has no limitations as to how many Power Gem 1s it will create. It does consume all of it, but generally by this point you're probably dealing enough damage that it's not going to matter. So then let's take a look now with that math. What does that look like? So so the difference here is you need to do 4 attacks rather than 4 turns. All right, and so let's assume that you can attack every single turn. With 5 relics, you can generate 100 intensity, and then with 3 Freya, so Freya will actually generate 120 intensity because she does generate every single turn. Okay, so every single turn, 3 of them for 4 turns, that's going to give you 120 intensity. For a total of 220 intensity, one single Valhalla's Maiden will actually spawn 22 Power Gem 1s. All right. There is a limitation, and that is you must have Thor in your deck, and the passive needs to be active. So that means the most you can have is only 3 Freya. You have to have the full deck with Valhalla's Maiden, 1 Thor, and then up to 3 Freya for this deck. The last one is the Panda Deck, okay, and this includes a Flying Lotus, Master Wu, and a Jade Protector. So Flying Lotus is the main intensity generator, and she will actually have a there's a limitation here where she does create 2 Earth Gems, but then only if there are 12 or more Earth Gems on the board, she'll add 30 to honor intensity. So if there's less than 12, then there will actually be no honor intensity generated at all. Right, and then Master Wu is the card that also deals a lot of damage, but there is a passive here that is required for the ultra rare card, and that is called a multi-hit passion. So every 4th attack this hero deals, it will create 4 Earth Gems and then cast Familial Honor for 1 turn. So this is where it will use a passive, and it only happens on the 4th attack. And then the Jade Protector will then wait. It basically depends on the Familial Honor to be active. And then it will create 1 Earth Power Gem 1 for every 10 stacks of Honor intensity. So again, the same thing, it's using 10 stacks of Honor intensity here. And then if we use that math here, with 5 relics, you're now generating 100 intensity. With 3 Flying Lotus, let's assume that by the 4th attack, there are enough gems, at least 12 gems on the board. It will actually generate 90 intensity. Now, if you take a look at the cooldown is really what's important to note as well. The Flying Lotus has a 3-turn cooldown. So after the first turn, I assume that it's unlikely that you're going to have 12 Earth Gems on board, but it's more likely that you will have 12 gems by the 4th turn, by the 2nd time that this activates. And so if it does activate, then you're going to be able to generate the 90 intensity on the 4th attack. So this one's going to be a little tricky. You have to time the attack with the turn itself so that you can really take advantage of the intensity there. But in any case, assume that there's 190 intensity, it will spawn 90 Power Gem 1s. Again, the limitation is you have to have Master Wu in the deck as well, and also this one requires a little bit more finagling of the timing of your cards. Right. So these are the 3 decks here, and you can take a look to see, like, they're all really good. So if there's 19 Power Gem 1s for the Panda deck, and then you're looking at 22 Power 1 gems for the Maiden deck, and then for the Mummy deck, it generates either 16 or 20 Power Gems, depending on which card you use. But the thing with the Mummy deck is that there's no limitations, right? So number one, you don't have to have Frankenstein on your team, so you can have another Mummy if you want. You can have more witches. You can have more combinations, and this really just, on the 4th turn, no matter what, you can just go ahead and generate this many Power Gems. Okay, so it doesn't require any timings. It doesn't require any, passive or active skills to be activated. So the Mummy deck is really easy to use, and it's really powerful. All right, so now let's take a look at this event. So let's take a look at the cards here, and I'm just going to focus on the cards themselves. So we'll talk about the same thing here, like our intensity generator. So Mr. Crow will also generate 10 corrupt intensity, but it has a 7-turn cooldown. So that really means if we're using our same 4-turn formula, you basically use it one time, you're done. Okay, so with 3 Mr. Crows, we're talking about 30 corrupt intensity. All right. And then we can see that Alexa Tesla, which is actually the card that will have the, if you could take a look at her battle skill or her passive skill. Her passive skill will have a 30% chance to create 4 light gems and cast lock on for 1 turn. So now this card has a luck component to it where it may or may not cast the ability to unlock the power gem spawner, but every single attack you have a 30% chance. So let's say, assume on turn 4 we do actually activate this. What happens then? We can take a look at the ultra rare card here, and let's just go into the collection here. I can't see Sofija at 6 stars, but I will make some assumptions here, right? So it will basically create 1 light power gem, 1 for every 20 stacks of intensity. Now I would assume that in 6 stars, it's going to drop down to 10 stacks. Okay, so with that formula, basically we're looking at 100 intensity with using all of the 5 relics, plus 30 from Mr. Crow, and that is going to get you a total of 13 power gem 1s on turn 4. So in comparison, it is a little less, but you're generating 13 power gem 1s, and if you can match them all together and you can swap them, you are going to generate a lot of damage. Plus, you are also creating additional light gems. You're also increasing the drop rate of light gems. So everything combined is going to just have a cascading effect of your damage. And now you can also take a look at the ultra rare card. So Tesla Reborn. This card is interesting too because it's also a Warden. And if you take a look, this is at the 6 stars, right? So it actually has the same thing. It creates 1 light power gem 1 for every 10 stacks of corrupt intensity. So now with this card, it's the same thing, right? So there's really no difference here. So you can have 2 of these doing the same thing there. But again, the limitation is you also need to have Alexa Tesla here, and you need to somehow generate a corrupt intensity. Now, because it is a corrupt hero, so this event is a light corrupt hero, you can actually use the previous corrupt relics. So we can take a look here. So if you look at the gears here, and you can sort of target the corrupt, you can see that there are 2 relics here that can be used, one that generates green gem and one that generates red gem. So if you don't have enough relics, you can actually use that. In addition to that, you can use other cards that generate corrupt intensity, like the witch that we talked about, and that could also help out. So in that case, you can actually generate more, but the only thing is you need to match green gems instead of light gems. So that's going to be a little bit tougher. So how do I think about this deck overall? I think that it's basically the same thing as a Halloween or Panda or a Valhalla deck. And the twist here is that it does have a luck component to it, but I think that's still going to be very powerful. So if you don't have a deck like what I just talked about, and this is something you've wanted, I believe this is the deck for you if you choose to invest in it. Now, keep in mind, getting an ultra rare card is not easy, so it can cost you a lot of gems, so that's something to consider. I just wanted to provide information on how do the decks compare to each other and how viable I think this might be. All right, so this is a light Slayer deck, and I think that it could have a lot of really good potential. So I'm looking forward to trying it out when the event does start. I'm going to see if they keep the skills as is or if they plan to change it, and then I will evaluate this again afterwards. So thank you for watching. I know the video is a little bit longer this time, but I wanted to go through each of the decks, sort of go through a comprehensive view of each. And so hopefully this has been helpful for you, and hopefully this is helping you make some decisions. And also, if you have any feedback or any suggestions or questions, please let me know. Thank you very much for all of your support, and I will talk to you soon.